This is the Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro Podcast, the neurohacking show where we teach you how to optimize your cognition. Keep up to date at roscoeswetsuitneuro.com. Now here's your host, Toby Passman.
All right, welcome everyone to a new episode of the Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro Podcast. We're going to be introducing special guest Dr. Glenn Weiner in just a couple minutes, but first he's going to tell us why we should listen to the episode today.
Well, I don't know if it's listening to me as much as the fact that we're going to talk about neuromodulation, which is something very near and dear to my heart because it's pretty powerful in a number of ways. It's been just a phenomenal way to work with people who are suffering. It's a great approach for working with people who want to optimize their brain and their mind. And then finally, it's a fascinating tool to help people who are seekers, who are looking to expand consciousness and explore that whole side of things. So for all those reasons, it's just a wonderful toolbox that I've enjoyed immensely for a number of years now.
Great. So we're going to dive into all of that stuff in just a minute. To introduce Dr. Weiner, he is a licensed clinical psychologist who added neurofeedback to his practice in 1999. He's presented a number of times for ISNR and BCIA, as well as at the Dead of Winter conferences on a variety of topics, including integrating psychotherapy and neurofeedback, introduction to QEEG, treatment protocol development, child neurotherapy, home neuromodulation, progress monitoring, and deep states training. He wrote a chapter on integrating psychotherapy and neurofeedback, which appeared in the Handbook of Clinical QEEG and Neurotherapy, which I can tell you guys from personally reading a good chunk of that book is quite the comprehensive resource right there. So that's very cool that you were a part of that, Dr. Weiner. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. We all sound so good on paper, don't we? No, I'm just
So tell me a little about just kind of your introduction to neurofeedback. How did you first hear about it? What originally piqued your interest?
Well, back in 1999, when the bull market was running and I was in private practice, a friend came to me and said that if you really want to stay on top of the ADHD game, then you really need to learn about this stuff. You need to get trained. And so as a result, it worked out to go down and meet with Joel and Judith Lubar for a few days, which is kind of what the training was back in those days. It made a lot of sense. I bought a piece of equipment and began training folks in the office. And that led to being able to get some results that you really can't get any other way. There's some, so I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm in a pretty traditional outpatient group practice situation. And typically, it's been psychotherapy. And for things like ADHD, it was the only other solution was medication, which again is helpful for, I think about a third of the people have a wow response, a third have a partial response, a third don't get much better. But this opened up possibilities to help folks at a higher hit rate. And then over time began to utilize it for anxiety and mood disorders and a variety of other things. So it really has been a wonderful expansion of the kinds of impact that we could have with folks. So that was just a great discovery.
So for longtime listeners of the podcast, you guys have heard various episodes talk about neurofeedback, but Dr. Weiner, I just wanted to kind of hear from you, how would you define neurofeedback?
Yeah, so if, for example, one way, there's some problems that are learned problems. So if you walk outside and you get mugged and you're afraid to go outside, that's kind of a learned problem. And there's some problem that are brain-based problems. So ADHD, psychotic kinds of things, typically obsessive compulsive disorder, traumatic brain injury. And typically if we were to do an MRI or CAT scan for anybody with any of those brain-based problems, things come out pretty okay, because those methods are just not sensitive enough to be able to pick up things. And quantitative EEG is a way to identify where there's brain dysregulation. And by dysregulation, I mean making some brainwave speeds too much and other brainwave speeds too little. So our brain gives off electricity, and we can measure it by putting one or multiple sensors on the scalp. And we can begin to figure out if somebody's making way too many sleepy brainwaves, brainwaves that would be great if we're spacing out at the beach. Those same brainwaves, while great at the beach, are not so good if you're in a meeting trying to pay attention, or if you're trying to read. Or, for example, if you're in bed at night and you are reading and you get to the point where you go, what did I just read? Well, you're slipping into those slower, in this case, theta brainwaves. And then you have a choice: either wake yourself back up to get into these higher, faster beta speeds so you can process the information, or close the book and go down into delta and fall asleep. And so neurofeedback is the process of giving somebody feedback or information back about their brainwaves moment to moment. So imagine a clip on each ear, a sensor on your head, and you're watching a bar graph reflecting how much of this spacey theta waves you're making moment to moment. You're making 15, you're making 7, but averaging around 10. And I say to you, we're going to play a game. If you keep your theta waves below your average of 10 for a second, I'll give you $1. And you go, okay, I don't know how to do this, but sure. So 12, no dollar, 9, you get $1, 7, you get another $1. If we did that long enough, your EEG would get better regulated. You would learn to make less theta. And theta, as an example, is something that if we're ADHD, we make these bursts of theta intermittently. And when that happens, if the teacher's giving instructions, we have to look around and go, what's going on? Or we have to reread if we're reading. And so this is a way, neurofeedback is a type of biofeedback, also called brainwave biofeedback, where we're giving you information about your EEG moment to moment, which enables us to control it better, to get better regulated. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. So brainwaves, are kind of, the way I kind of describe it to some people, it's sort of like breathing, in the sense that it's, occurring, without any conscious awareness, yet we can very well choose to bring conscious awareness and learn to modify our breathing along with our brainwave patterns, which is what, neurofeedback is doing. So that analogy may help some listeners kind of get a better grasp for it who aren't necessarily in the field. But
I would add another piece to it, because you're getting at the issue of, is this a conscious or an unconscious process? And so the very initial research was training cats. And now cats don't care about getting $1. We don't give dollars, you get points in games, but cats, when they make the pattern, get rewarded with a dollop of chicken soup. And so that brainwaves can be modified through reinforcement, operant conditioning being the fancy term, without awareness. And I think of that as the operant conditioning side of it. And then I think about the awareness, or the better discernment, of when you're kind of in the zone versus out of the zone, as being kind of a classical conditioning thing. So if I say to you, I want you to get your right bicep stronger, you can, do curls, you can kind of figure it out, you can kind of know how stressed it is, but it's harder to, if I say to you, I want you to decrease your theta in your right temporal lobe, that's a lot harder, because you can't. And so this gives us that information so we can do that kind of training.
Right. So you've been trained by a lot of the top leading clinicians in the field of neurofeedback, and there are a lot of different methodologies for doing neurofeedback. So I was just curious, kind of, being trained by so many different people who all use various different forms of neurofeedback, what's been kind of your your biggest takeaways from all of that teaching, and then how you kind of integrate the different or decide, which forms of neurofeedback that you actually want to do in your clinical practice.
Well, part of it, I think, is kind of the blind men, describing the elephant. There's different parts to it, so it depends on your viewpoints. So I think we can separate. When I try to teach this, I try to divide into mechanistic versus arousal-based models. And so a mechanistic model is the quantitative EEG informed model. So in that model, you're doing some kind of, whether it's one sensor or several sensors, or the more common 19 sensors, measurement simultaneously. Typically comparing that to a database of other people your age. At times doing what's called Loretta analysis, which is a way to try to figure out which part of the brain at a lower level is this EEG signal coming from. But all of that said to say, okay, the brain map is saying, compared to other people, you're low in this and you're high in this, and therefore we're trying to train back to the averages, so to speak. And so I'm calling that mechanistic because it's kind of, let's fill in the valleys, let's knock down the mountains. And when doing that, people tend to get better and do well. So there's that. And most of the, so anyway, that's one way to think about it. A different way to think about it is an arousal-based model. And the arousal-based model would say, let's try to figure out if you tend to be more on the under-aroused side, more sleepy, more sluggish, versus being on the over-aroused side, more hyper, more anxious, more perhaps irritable. And then let's try to train, and it could be both, could be an instability, kind of with the third type of arousal problems. And based on how I would peg you into one of those patterns, we would then do protocols that are helpful in raising arousal versus decreasing arousal or stabilizing arousal. And in a, so as you, I was blessed with, at the time when I was learning this, there's phenomenally good teachers that were very, very accessible. And so being able to, learn how people were doing it, recognizing that all of them continue to evolve with the research and as the art and science kind of continued, as we all do. So I think ultimately end up integrating it, trying to weigh how much of it is this. So in some cases, with certain clear deficits, you're in a mechanistic model, and some you're an arousal model. And again, a lot of nuances to it, but that might be probably enough detail for right now, or do you want more?
Yeah, I think that should be sufficient for now. So when it comes to, people, patients that you work with doing neurofeedback, how many sessions do you typically find it takes for them to start seeing really good results?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's asked every time. So what I say is, I don't know. Everybody's brain is a little bit different. I say that most of the research was done on 40 sessions, twice a week for 20 sessions in traditional neurofeedback. One of the approaches that I utilize is called LENS, which stands for Low Energy Neurofeedback System, and that tends to be a faster approach. And sometimes we combine them, and sometimes we do some kind of assessment, figure out what's the most reasonable way to start. And sometimes that's the right protocol, the right placement of where the sensors are, the right rewarding or inhibiting of specific brainwave patterns. And sometimes we don't get there. And then we move to the next most reasonable protocol. Sometimes it's a third protocol. Sometimes you hit it right out of the box and we're off to the races. And with LENS, I had somebody 2 weeks ago who had a couple of pretty bad concussions with panic attacks every day, with memory impairment, with pretty severe migraines all day long. After the first session, headaches are gone by 85%, something like that. The panic attacks essentially are gone. Wouldn't it be nice if everybody were like that? That would be great. Okay, it's not the case. So in general, about 70, I tell people that about 70% of people have a good response to neurofeedback. If people push me for how will they know when they'll see something, well, with Lens, it's a little quicker, so it's easier for me to say, if we don't see anything within 8 sessions, we're not going to see anything. With traditional neurofeedback, maybe it's 10 sessions. If I'm not seeing anything in 6 sessions, I'm probably going to change the protocol. And so, and again, everybody's just a little bit different.
And when it comes to initially kind of creating a protocol for a patient, what's your process as far as, kind of choosing which system to use, like you alluded to the Lens system, and then choosing kind of, frequencies, which electrode sites that you want to train. What's your process about, kind of going about that?
Yeah, so there are a few things that have, a few protocols that have some research behind it that's decent. So working along the central strip, training up low beta has some data that says that's pretty good for seizures. It's pretty good for sleep problems. So unless there's a reason not to do that, if there's sleep problems, sleep is something that, if sleep is a significant issue in addition to other things, I'm going to tend to go after sleep first. And if somebody's coming in just with migraines, there's a protocol that seems to be pretty helpful for migraines. So it would be reasonable to do that protocol. And then other people, if the quantitative EEG or brain map is very clear and specific and focalized, we may go directly for where the focus is. And if it's more of a arousal problem, we may, tend to deal with. So it's partly the data and partly the clinical judgment about who this person is in front of us that makes the decision. And Lens has some advantages, I think, for people who were functioning well and then something happened, some kind of trauma. Whereas perhaps the more genetic-based things like ADHD may do better with traditional, but we've had people both. We've had trauma people do well with traditional neurofeedback, and we've had ADHD individuals do very well with Lens. So there's some general loose kind of clinical lore, rule of thumbs and experience rule of thumbs that guide some of that.
Okay. And how about as far as have you noticed any specific, say nutritional interventions or lifestyle interventions that, maybe accelerate the pace of someone's results doing neurofeedback?
Yeah, well, everything's connected. So, I want people hydrating. I want people exercising. I want people taking fish oil. If there's a vitamin D deficiency, I like that addressed. So I think we know all those things pretty well scientifically. And then for me, I think there's then a drop of what we really know as a science. So I think below that, we get into the gluten sensitivities, and below that, we get into the dairy sensitivities. I have a friend that's very interested in the electromagnetic noise toxins in the environment, the Wi-Fi and the level of, and he shared some information about the toxicity and the inflammatory effects of Wi-Fi and time on phones and things like that. So the dilemma, though, is that we're always working with people. And with people, you have to meet them where they are. And it's unusual that you can get everybody to do all the things you want them to do because they're doing the best they can. And so we can be prissy about it. Well, I'm not going to see you unless you do these things. But I think you have to meet people where they are. So you have people that are consuming a lot of alcohol or a lot of THC or or are, staying up, late hours surfing and doing video games. And again, the dance is how can we try to engage them in a relationship that has enough, solidness and connection and encouragement to get them to risk doing, because all these things they've heard already. It's not like everybody knows they ought to be meditating. Everybody knows they ought to be exercising, but getting people to do that, it's harder to do without a therapeutic relationship for the kind of folks that I'm seeing that are suffering, different than the kind of optimizers that I alluded to before and the seekers.
Would you be able to, you think, get results doing neurofeedback with, say, someone who comes in sleeping 2 hours a night, they're smoking weed, drinking alcohol, every day, just engaging in all of the worst sort of lifestyle habits? Would neurofeedback still help that kind of individual?
So the answer is yes. And part of the dance is you're spending a lot of time and money to do this. It's so much less efficient if you're coming in here after doing this or this. But again, these are folks that are struggling. They're doing the best they can. So I've worked with folks that are drinking heavy amounts every day. But the question is, why are they drinking heavy amounts every day? Well, they're drinking heavy for some, it's to quell the anxiety. I wake up, I can't self-regulate. I'm just so overwhelmed. I have such racing thoughts and such thoughts of shame and fear. And this is the only thing that enables me, the alcohol that enables me to kind of partially function. And so they're in the parking lot before work, having a drink so they can go into work, and they're, going during the coffee break back out to their car so they can do it. And so I could be prissy and say, well, if you're not going to do what I say, then, I can't help you. But I think a lot of people get left off the bus when you take that approach. So, one guy that I'm working with is bipolar, pretty severe alcohol use. And, you try, so it becomes a therapeutic dance of, he wants to come in for neurofeedback. I want to give you neurofeedback. I want to see if we can get a couple of these things under control a little bit. Now, I can't keep putting it off indefinitely while I try to get him to do some things. If he can't do some things, as I did in this example, we started doing some neurofeedback, which may make it a little bit easier to do a couple of those minor things. So if he can get out of bed and not have his first drink till after lunch, that's a big change for him. And so, again, you have to work with where people are, I think, because it's really hard for a lot of folks. And we see a lot of very, very suffering folks that come in, of which some benefit greatly from this.
It makes sense, though, kind of, with sort of building a positive momentum, kind of taking baby steps of, like, if someone starts doing neurofeedback and they start to feel a little bit less anxious, then maybe they have one less drink, and then maybe they're encouraged to start exercising a bit, and then they're exercising and they start eating a bit healthier, kind of just stacking more and more positive interventions.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So when it comes to, more so like the peak performance kind of optimization crowd, a common criticism, I guess, of some forms of neurofeedback being that, you're training to a normative database, and it's like, which might be great if you're dealing with a clinical disorder. Whereas if you're taking someone who's already, say, functioning above normal and they want to, be Superman, how do you go about training that sort of person?
Yeah. So part of it gets into what is it that they want and what gets in the way of them doing what they want. You can do neurofeedback. You can do an assessment based on a normative database, and you can train live to a normative database, and you can do an assessment to identify where there's brain dysregulation and train without regard to a normal database. And so it depends on where they're at. So if somebody is extraordinarily bright, neurofeedback doesn't dumb them down. But if they are getting stuck by getting into these ruminative, obsessive kind of loops, okay, so that maybe that's what we want to, so it's kind of figuring out what gets in the way with somebody. If somebody is, I do great, but I can't get to sleep last night because, at night because my mind is so racing, then you work on how do they learn how to quiet their brain down. So it doesn't dumb anybody down. We're looking to increase brain stability and brain flexibility. And that's good for really all the things that we want to do. And moving on to the seeker kind of question, there are some people that what they really want to do is they want to enter a much deeper meditative state. And so with them, we might be training theta up, which is a terrible thing to do if you have ADHD. But if you're looking to be a really deep meditator, that might be something that would be done, because we know that certain patterns arise when you look at advanced meditators and people that have unique skills in that area.
That's an interesting conundrum I've thought about for the past several years, because it's like, it seems like, as you're saying, if you want to get into those deeper states, training theta is going to be good. Whereas if you have ADHD or concentration issues, you might not want to do that. But then there's also kind of, I've seen research about meditation, mindfulness really benefiting ADHD, which seems like a bit of a paradox there. But I guess there's more to meditation, that has more effects than just increasing theta waves. That's at least how I've thought about it.
Correct. Yeah. That's not, and then we get into this whole self-awareness and discernment, so that when someone's learning to meditate or when someone's doing neurofeedback, part of it is they're getting some language for some of these skills, and they're getting some increased appreciation for these nuances of focus. So for example, if we say, let's set up a scale 0, +1, +2, -1, -2. And I say to you, on any given day, you can tell me the difference if you're a +2 or a minus. If you didn't get sleep and you're not feeling good, you're not focusing, well, you know what that -2 feels like. And you're really cranking away on all cylinders, you know what that +2 feels like. You can't really discern plus and minus a half, probably, unless the more you meditate, the better you get at noticing those subtleties. A friend of mine went to Plum Village, which is Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery in France. He's a world spiritual leader, meditative kind of guy. And the report I got was that for the monks, when they were doing neurofeedback, for them it was like crack cocaine, because they can discern like 0.1 from 0.2, which is something that they're so sensitive as it is, but with the instrumentation they can really discern. So those of us that aren't monks can get better and better about discerning, so that we can tune in to notice, when is it that I'm starting to lose it? Or no, I'm not quite where I know I need to be. So it's easier that awareness is part of the making adjustment piece of it. And so that may be one piece of the question you're asking.
Now, I wanted to move on to a topic in which you wrote the book chapter on this, in terms of integrating psychotherapy and neurofeedback. Tell me about that. How do you go about implementing those couple interventions together?
Yeah. So again, I think that we all do it anyway. And so what does that mean? So anybody that's seeing somebody with for neurofeedback, so first session is a typical psychotherapy session. Who are you? let me get a sense of some of your history. Where are things stuck? What things have you tried? And it's can I connect with you in a way that you feel that I care about you and I'm really trying my best to be of help? And can I try to understand it? And then if it's in the realm of something that neurofeedback would help, and the old joke is, what is neurofeedback helpful for? Only those things that the brain is involved with. It's involved with a lot of things. And so I think with people, I run through, well, here's the options that I know of. And at this point, I'm trying not to see, just because of scheduling, I'm trying not to see people just for straight psychotherapy. So I'm seeing a lot of people. This is why they're coming in and they want some information about it. And we go through it. But I think it begins, so part of psychotherapy is this holding environment and this place where people can look at their stuff and have labels for problems. Part of it is figuring out, so we're lending them encouragement and support. It's a holding environment. And we're trying to seed change. So we're trying to begin to move this intractable problem into kind of the way it would get better would be coming up with some steps for what it would look like. Wouldn't it be nice if, the guy who's not leaving his house were able to go sit outside at night, feeling safe enough being outside for 15 minutes? That would be a step up if he's not leaving his house. And so the idea of this kind of, and the other thing we give them is we give them some labels. And during the feedback session, which I think is an incredibly powerful experience, because if you're coming in to see me and you're saying, I have these problems, I'm having trouble focusing, let's say, and I've had it for a long time. And I go over your brain map with you and I go, well, here's where things are great and here's where things are not. So here's where there's dysregulation, and it really fits with the kind of symptoms and difficulties that you're struggling with. For some people that they cry, it's, I knew there was something, I couldn't put my words, we couldn't figure it out. It's one of the, unfortunately, psychiatry doesn't study the organ that they're treating. And so here we're linking it up in a way that, is clear to people. Now, whether we can, solve it or not, we don't know, but we can see the dysregulation, and there's a validating gift aspect to that. So that's another piece. I think part of psychotherapy is lending hope. Part of psychotherapy is, at this point in the game, I'm blessed with having done this for a while. So if a chronic pain patient comes in, I can look them in the eye and say, I don't know if we're going to be able to be of help or not, but I can assure you I've seen people that are worse that have gotten better. I don't know if you're going to be in that, in that group that does or doesn't, and we're going to try everything we possibly can. So I think, we can generate, I think people can, I think if we're in a position where we're being compassionate and able to let people know that we're going to do this side by side, it greatly increases what the electrodes and what the feedback does, if that makes sense.
And how about also, I guess, the kind of flipping that around there too, in terms of if you're working on improving the biological basis of someone's brain function by improving and stabilizing their electrical activity, does that accelerate kind of their ability to make more psychological changes, say in psychotherapy?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like, I think that neurofeedback makes all other therapies better. So if you work with a kid with dyslexia, neurofeedback doesn't teach them how to read. But if their brain is working more efficiently, then they're much better able to work with the intensive reading, Orton Gilliam, Luna Mubel kind of programs that are targeting those things. So again, it just, it supports and makes other interventions more accessible. that if you have someone who's super anxious and is drinking a lot of alcohol and they're much less anxious, they're going to drink less. They may then be okay enough to go to AA if that's what they're going to do, or do some behavioral monitoring of how much drinking that they're doing that they couldn't do before. But now that they've upgraded a little bit, that's enough now to go for the next upgrade.
Now, when it comes to other interventions kind of combined with neurofeedback, what are your thoughts on, say, brain photobiomodulation or transcranial neurostimulation, or even now I've heard some practitioners are starting to use like, psychedelic assisted therapy and integrating that with neurofeedback. So what are your thoughts on all those ways, other modalities?
All good. And choice points amongst all those, and with some commonalities amongst all those. So I use the inner balance a lot, heart rate variability training. Sometimes I'll do that before we do neurofeedback. It's easy to do, and I like the idea of getting people to try to self-regulate every day at home. So it's a great device, pops into your phone, clips on your ear, measures your heart rate. We would play with it in the office. They would take home a unit, and if I can get compliance with that, that also builds compliance with other things, by the way. That being said, great device. There are some neurofeedback clinicians that I know that combine heart rate variability training while they're doing neurofeedback. And there's a correlation between having better heart rate coherence, which we can talk about if you want to, but heart rate coherence with low beta or sensory motor rhythm activity, which is kind of a calm focused brainwave. So as one goes up, the other goes up. So I like the idea of doing that. The photobiomodulation, just to describe this for your listeners, imagine a helmet. The V-light is an example of one where you have kind of diodes in this helmet that are pulsing in light at a certain frequency. The way that works, and anyway, so it's pulsing in light at a certain frequency. There's two flavors. One is it pulses in alpha, the original V-light, and another one that pulses in gamma, much faster. So my dad, who passed away in January at the age of 96, probably for the last, I'm guessing 10 years of his life, I had him doing photobiomodulation. He was out of state, couldn't do neurofeedback with him, too far away. But I like photobiomodulation as a way to add energy to the brain. The theory is I think it stimulates the mitochondrial cells to. So I like that. If folks are early dementia or having some early cognitive decline, great intervention. He said psychedelic assisted therapy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, in thinking about psychedelic assisted therapy, there's the mantra of, set and setting, which is what are the circumstances that it's being done in, and what it's really a lot about to me, the pre and post processing of it. So if you're in a therapy relationship with somebody and have kind of worked through what are somebody's intentions or what they want to get out of and you can substitute cannabis for done in certain ways for the more psychedelics. What is it that they want to have happen? And then the processing part of that. And that's all, to me, the part that what I get from looking at the psychedelic literature is that for many people, this has been one of the most profound experiences in their life. They have a sense of reality being much greater than they had ever perceived it, a hopefulness about life after death of this existence, And then there's a lot of people that have had benefit, but the benefits fade after a month or 2 or 3, something like that. And that gets back to how do you process it and figure out to try to maximize what you're getting. And I think that, again, neurofeedback is about self-regulation. So if we're training, if somebody is not well self-regulated, we want to train them to do that. If they're not feeling powerful enough, it's also a very self-efficacious intervention. It really builds because it's not, ultimately, it's not the machine. It's the people that are doing this well can, at times I've had people where they can make the pattern when they're hooked up to the machine. And eventually you get to the point where you turn the volume, feedback volume off, you put a towel over the screen. Tell me when you think you're making the pattern. And, you know, when people can make the pattern under those circumstances, then they don't need the equipment at that point to do it.
I don't know if there's any research studies on this yet, but something that's come to my mind lately is like the idea of, you know, with like microdosing psychedelics being something that's really kind of emerging,
Right.
you know, within the past few years. You know, say you take a substance like psilocybin, which is going to increase neuroplasticity by jacking up nerve growth factor and BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Like, I almost wonder, you know, if someone was to take like a microdose of psilocybin an hour, 2 hours before a neurofeedback session, whether that enhanced neuroplasticity would enable them to get better results with the neurofeedback training. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I don't know at all the neurochemistry of psychedelics. So, but if your conjecture that this would increase neuroplasticity, then it would make sense that neurofeedback may be able to learn better or hold better, because it's about neuroplasticity is what all this is about.
Right. That's like theoretically why, to me at least, it seems like there'd be great synergy there. But if anyone's listening who wants to do a research study, please do so. I'd love to see the results.
Yeah.
Well, how about in terms of, you know, as you look kind of towards the future of neurofeedback and neuromodulation just as a whole, what excites you the most about just kind of where we're going, what we're going to be able to do going forward?
Well, first, it's been a slow ride because I guess this is year 22 or 23 for me doing it. And every once in a while, something happens that makes you feel that, wow, it's going to take off now. And it grows, but at a very, very slow rate relative to the way it should grow. It's probably 10, 15 years now. I gave a talk for 150 psychiatrists in a room. And I thought, I'm going to be so busy from this, I'm going to have problems that I can't, you know, I thought, you know, I wanted to train other people to do this. And, you know, at the end of it, there wasn't that much activity. I'm in a group private practice. At one point, we had 30 clinicians, but I can't get people to do neurofeedback because the economics are not that good at this point. Nobody really makes a lot of money off this. Therapists can do about as well with doing psychotherapy. And so it spreads inadvertently almost that somebody knows if somebody gets better, they try it, it works out, a therapist kid gets better, that therapist feels obligated now to learn how to do it. And these are all very learnable skills. There's a number of groups that train people to do this. So the big expansion hasn't really happened in the way that I think would be good for the world. My hope is that the home training equipment has gotten better and better and less expensive, and that's my hope. And so there's more and more dry electrode kinds of options. A lot of them are still kind of cumbersome. I always get the latest equipment that I can find that seems reasonable to kind of test out, because I think if we can get people to do that, if we can see somebody for an assessment in the office, teach them how to use equipment, you know, some of the equipment lets us monitor their session over the internet. It becomes less expensive, less time demanding for people. More people can be seen less expensively. And I think that's one of the things I'm excited about. And, I'm hoping that, more research over, because whenever there's more research, that adds to the mix of it. The research on seizure disorders and ADHD is pretty decent. And there's case studies and clinical use on lots of things. And so every once in a while, someone will do a study that's worth adding to the list of really good studies. And now we have a little bit more, but because nobody makes a lot of money on it, the research is slow. And because the leading right now in medical school psychiatrists in training get minimal psychotherapy training, no exposure to biofeedback. And so people don't know about it. It's just, you do what? What is that? So I'm hoping that gets a little bit better over time. And programs like this, my intention in responding to your invitation is I want to spread the word that this is a good thing to do for people.
Right. Yeah. A few more people hear about it. Who knows who they might tell. And yeah, hopefully it'll eventually get to a point where it really does make a, monumental societal change.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Weiner, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show today. If people want to connect with you or find out more about your practice, where would you direct them to?
They can go www.biofeedbackforthebrain.com.
Great.
And you can do a Google search on me fairly easily. And I'm not the pro tennis player with the same name, but I got the site first. No.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, for those listeners who enjoyed the show, I'd love it if you could give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro. You can also go ahead and listen and subscribe on whatever audio platform that you listen to the podcasts on, whether that be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the other major platforms. We are on them all. Dr. Weiner, again, I wanted to really thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and expertise with me on the show today.
You're very welcome, and thank you for the platform.
Of course.